I will call this council public hearing to order. Please stand for the pledge. Alan, would you lead us, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy, roll, please.
Carter. Here. Walter.
Here.
Howe.
Here.
Barstow.
Here.
Hayes. Here. Picken.
Here.
Lee.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum present. Tonight's public hearing is to consider the following application. An application to rezone property located on West Broad Street Southwest, parcel number 064-307-692-00.000, totaling 4.85 plus or minus acres in the city of Pataskala from GB, which is general business, zoning classification, to R10, which is high-density residential zoning classification. Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you first, and then we'll go to public comments. What do you got for me tonight?
All right, thank you, Mayor. The applicant is Grand Communities LLC. The owner is P&G Pataskala Limited. It's located at 200 West Broad Street, and as you mentioned, it's 4.85 acres. The current zoning is general business, but the request is to rezone the 4.5 acres from general business to R10 pursuant to 121710 of the Pataskala Code. So an overall aerial shot. The property in its entirety is outlined in yellow. The settlement is located to the east. Only a portion of this property would be developed as part of the Heron Manor subdivision. Broad Street to the south, and City Hall is located here. As I mentioned, it's part of an overall subdivision proposal. The proposed subdivision would be everything outlined to the west of the settlement. The area to the north here is already zoned R10. The applicant's request is to rezone this portion of the general business portion of the property to R10. Again, here's the zoning map, R10 located up here with the proposed subdivision in this area, and to include a portion of the general business district down there. And just to highlight, with the light pink existing R10, the darker pink is the proposed rezoning request. So as I mentioned, the request is to rezone 4.5 acres from general business to R10. As I mentioned, it's in conjunction with the proposed subdivision. The proposed subdivision would contain 151 lots overall. The whole subdivision, or the portion of the subdivision zoned R10 currently, is 44 acres. So this would be overall a little bit more than about 48 acres in size. Planning Commission on February 6th approved the preliminary plan for Heron Manor. They did include a condition that the proposed rezoning also be approved by City Council, and at that meeting they did recommend approval of the proposed rezoning. The future land use map recommends this 4.5 acres as office, so pursuant to the future land use plan, the rezoning would not be in line with the comprehensive plan's recommendations. Staff did request a secondary access onto Broad to alleviate some traffic concerns that staff had. The fire district also requires 2 access points, one of which can be emergency only. The access point onto Broad will have a left turn lane from Broad into the subdivision. There's also 2 additional access points into the settlement, the stub of Isaac Tharp Street and the stub of Alonzo Palmer Street. So a general summary, as I mentioned, 151 lots overall. 169 lots is the maximum permitted by code, and that's under the R10 zoning. 20 lots will be in this proposed rezoning of the 4.85 acres. The gross density as proposed is 3.88 units per acre. Per code, the maximum is 4.3, and that's pursuant to the R10 zoning. They're providing 22.3% open space, and due to the development under the cluster housing regulations, there's no minimum open space requirement per code. And then a general rundown of the lots in the subdivision. As I mentioned, 151, typical lot width of 55 feet and a depth of 125 feet. This makes it about the minimum lot size of 0.16 acres. Front setback is 25, side setback is 5, and minimum rear setback is 20 feet. Maximum height is 35 feet, and the minimum dwelling size is 1,300 square feet. As I mentioned, since they're doing the development under the cluster regulations, they're very limited in terms of what the requirements are pursuant to that chapter of the code. So the only applicable regulations for this would be the minimum side yard setback of 5 feet, maximum height of 35 feet, and the minimum dwelling size of 1,300 square feet. All other regulations are based upon the cluster design, so those are not applicable to this application. I did provide the approval criteria pursuant to 121704 on the dais for reference, and it has the section of the code highlighted. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
What does 22% equate to as far as green space, acreage wise?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I will find that out.
Okay. Questions for Scott? Tom? Okay, I'm just looking around. Okay, who's first down there? Tim, you got something?
Scott, could you bring the map back up, please? I'm just looking for you to show us, so council knows, and so I know, I guess, the stubs that connect the Isaac Tharp Street and what, and then maybe talk just a little bit about why we requested the entrance onto Broad Street. We talked about it at a previous, I wanna say it was a previous council meeting, but it might have been a street committee meeting, so, and I'm not on the street committee, so.
So the two stubs are Isaac Tharp located to the north and Alonzo Palmer to the south. Under the original proposal, there was no connection to Broad, and staff had concerns that would funnel the majority of the traffic down Alonzo Palmer and onto John Reese. So staff felt it was appropriate to have a secondary access onto Broad to alleviate those traffic concerns. Our concern was on Alonzo Palmer, that's a stub street now, so they're not used to traffic, and suddenly would be a vast increase in the amount of traffic going down what's now a stub street, so we were concerned about the traffic.
And that was on one of them, is the other one's a stub street as well, is that correct?
That's correct.
So everybody in the development would be forced to drive on the stub street to get over to the main, which is the main artery to the park.
John Reese Parkway.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Did you have anything? Yes, Andy?
Scott, which school district is this in?
This is in southwest Licking.
Have we gotten any kind of comments from them, whether they approve it or oppose?
We have not.
Or in favor, I should say.
We have not, as part of all of our, when any application comes in, we route it to the school district for comment, but they did not provide any comments to us.
And I noticed on your size lots, these are basically the same size lots that we looked at for the Hunter's Crossing, correct?
Very similar.
Same size dwelling,
Yes.
minimum dwelling?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
It's a little hard to see here, but those two stubs then connect and makes the fire department happy to get in and out?
They're happy about this portion down here, that if there's an accident at John Reese Parkway, for example, they would have a secondary access into the subdivision via the new access point on Broad.
It was actually getting into it, okay,
That's correct.
okay. Yes, sir.
Scott, has anybody looked at the placement of the western access point as it appears on this? It's right across from the 84 Lumber, which is a commercial entrance. It doesn't show in here where their entrance is, but has anybody looked into that and given that some consideration that we may have? There's large trucks that go in and out of there, and obviously there's people going in there to purchase things, etc. Anybody considered that, look into that?
Yes, we did look at that. We have it lined up with that entrance as we think is appropriate. With the left turn lane, the traffic study did look at if there would be any conflict there, and we don't believe there would be any causing any problems.
Have you heard anything from 84 Lumber? I mean, I noticed they were on the list of the people who were notified. Have you heard anything from them?
We did not.
Okay.
So that does line up. When they pull out, you're either gonna go, okay, it's gonna create an intersection.
And the left turn lane will be for eastbound
That's correct.
Eastbound traffic, okay, that's what I thought, but I want to make sure. What's going to be between the last lot, and Broad Street? Is that gonna be, like it is now at the other entrance to the settlement with trees and open space, or what is that gonna be?
It'll remain open
Okay.
and would remain zone general business, so it would not be part of this development.
It's not part of the development.
That's correct. South of lots 1 and 153 would be outside of the development.
Who, if we know, it looks like the same prop as P&G Patasko Limited owns that, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So what sort of businesses could they put in between the last lot and Broad Street?
General business, that's a wide array. I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of various things. It could be a restaurant, hardware store. I mean, arguably it could be a grocery store, but I doubt the lot size is adequate to meet that.
Yes, Andy?
One more quick question. On Broad Street, is there enough pavement width now for a turn lane, or will they have to supplement the pavement out there?
There need to be more pavement.
So there is, okay.
Mr. Lee?
Scott, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So what we're talking about is the 20 or 30 homes down on the 4.5. What I wanted to clarify was, if hypothetically, if council did not go for that, the top parts can go in regardless, correct?
The way the application was submitted and the recommendation of planning commission is that the preliminary plan was approved with the condition that the proposed rezoning also be successful. So if the rezoning is not successful, then by default, the subdivision is not successful.
Yeah, but they can turn around and reapply.
They could
correctly,
reapply to rezone under the R10, or
And then
to
we just get
develop
what-
under the R10 standards.
So we would just get what's on top then.
Arguably, if it's approved by planning commission.
Mr. King?
If you can do, can you pull up the map that's, has the pink on it? There you go, I think that's a good way to see where the distinction is with this. But just to follow up on Tommy's, that upper part, that's the lighter pink, is currently zoned R10, and they'd be able to come in and develop there at R10. So what we're talking about is a difference of 20 lots.
That's correct.
In the rezoning portion.
So really, in theory, the top part, it's gonna happen either way. It's just whether or not we approve the entrance and the extra homes now, or we take it later, where we wouldn't have a say in it, it would just go in.
If planning commission approved the northern part, the light pink, yes, it would not need to appear before council.
Okay, all right.
So the dark pink just is going to, would have been light pink if it had had 20 more houses in it.
If it was zoned R10. If it was currently zoned R10, then it would be light pink.
Okay. Mr. Powell?
Would they, if we didn't approve the rezoning for whatever reason, would they still be able to have an entrance onto Broad Street without the houses?
I think it would be a requirement from staff that they
Okay.
still provide the entrance.
So they would still be able to develop the northern part of it, but, and still have an entrance onto Broad Street, but without the houses?
That's correct.
Go ahead. Could the dark pink part be developed, that's the part that's zone general business now, right?
That's correct.
So that could be developed not for residential, but could be developed now for general business.
Correct.
So under whatever they wanted to or could or chose to put under that category, they could put that in there.
That's correct.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I'm a little confused because Mike asked a really good question there. So based on what I asked and what Mr. Powell asked, they have to put the road in no matter what we decide this time. And if they choose to reapply, the road has to go in no matter what.
The staff would advise planning commission to have the road installed. It's up to the planning commission to agree with that, and make it as part of the development. But it would be staff's preference that that be installed as proposed.
But if they reapplied and they said yes, the planning commission, that would not come to council then because it's already R10.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Any final comments?
No, sir.
Okay. At this time, we'll open it up to public comments, and, yeah, just hang on a second. You'll have 5 minutes to speak, and we normally don't get into a back and forth debate. We have some time tonight, and if it's council's pleasure, we'll have some discussion on this. But it does have to pertain, obviously, to this public hearing. So, would you grab me the clipboard, please, BJ?
Yeah.
Connie, you want to speak first?
No, that's fine, I'll wait until afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome. Okay, who wishes to speak tonight on this topic? Yes, sir. Need your name and address, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Okay. My name is Tobias South. I reside at 391 Alonzo Palmer Street, which is one of the streets in question regarding opening that street up to connect to the neighborhood next to us. Attended 2 other meetings here and have a pretty good assessment of what we're looking to do and some of the concerns from the community. I know one of those was traffic. At the end of our street, we have kids that like to play out in that area. There's a basketball court there. And one of our concerns was traffic increasing. So once that street is connected to the next neighborhood, there will be more traffic in that area. So one of the concerns was safety in regard to the children playing in that area. And then there were concerns of those communities kind of being merged together as one. So it seemed to me that a reasonable solution would be to create a cul-de-sac at the end of Alonzo Palmer and a cul-de-sac in the other new neighborhood that's being developed. And possibly even, Isaac Thorpe, which is behind that pond, I guess, the same sort of scenario. And if traffic to that new community is an issue, then perhaps another entrance on Columbia may be a solution to that issue. But I think the second entrance there on Broad Street for that new community is at least part of that solution. So my recommendation was using cul-de-sacs at the end of both of those streets, or at least Alonzo Palmer.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, Connie, it's all up to you then.
Sure. Thank you very much. Connie Klima. I'm representing the developer, PO Box 991, Pataskala. I can pass out for you some packets that, so you can have it up close, view. As Scott had shared with you tonight, the only portion that we're talking about is the 4.85 acres that's currently zoned general business in the city of Pataskala. When this project was originally brought to the Planning Commission and the traffic access study was done, no second access on Broad Street was even required under the traffic study. And as you know, right now, the settlement has John Reese Parkway, only one access point. But that access point was considered to be plenty for what we were proposing. But your engineering department asked that we have another traffic access study and look at having, if we did have a second access onto Broad, what would that mean for the development? Because they said we would prefer you have that and not wait for the general business district to be developed, which when originally this was zoned, it was considered that second access would be put in when that commercial section was developed, and then it would go back and then finally connect with whatever subdivision. Originally, this property was zoned RM, 10 units per acre on the northern portion, and then Pro for office, and then GB, about 96 acres. Half of that acreage was then zoned R10. Okay, sure. So, when they went back and looked at the traffic access study, it came back that if we did do a secondary access, that it should be lined up with 84 Lumber Company, that it would require an eastbound turn lane, and that no additional improvements would be required at John Reese. This secondary access would not only serve this portion of what would be the extension of what had been the settlement, but now Heron Manor, but would also serve the settlement because it would provide a needed secondary access. The majority of traffic, obviously, if you're heading out to Broad Street, you're not gonna meander through the settlement and head down John Reach. You'll probably head south and go right out to Broad Street. So my clients did not even have that property in contract, did not have the ability to purchase it until they went back, renegotiated that 4.85 acres to be added to this portion of their subdivision, so they could have basically the secondary access, which would be the primary access to Heron Manor. The gentleman that just spoke, those two stub streets that you can see on the drawing, and I can show you here, those two stub streets are actually required, as you probably know, when subdivisions are done, that you will have a continuation of this development, which was originally planned. So those two stub streets are there because, and not cul-de-sac, because it was always intended that this would be developed then, after it was rezoned, into the remainder of the settlement, or as we're now calling this, the Heron Manor. Now, not relying on those two, which we could have, and adding this, it's unlikely there will be as much traffic unless somebody's probably heading up to the park. Most will be going south onto Broad Street for access there. But also I want to point out that the way this is designed is, this 4.85 acres, Mr. Barstow, you asked about the entry. It's landscaped all the way down to Broad Street, and we have our landscaping and buffer areas we intentionally put between the settlement and Heron Manor. So there is no actual lot in Heron Manor that touches any lot in the settlement. So there is a buffering area. They like the connectivity, some of the people at the planning commission meeting that spoke, but they also, some of them didn't want anything ever built there. So the point is that we've tried to make that separation, but at the same time have it so that you can access both ways. As Scott was saying, also in response to Mr. Powell's question, this secondary access portion and the addition of some lots that we have there is basically to basically bring the subdivision down to Main Street to have the proper access. Also, there will be the widening of Broad Street and the construction of a turn lane. Those additional lots will be able to help also with that. You asked a bit about the lining up of 84 Lumber Company access. If you go to the second or third page of that, you'll have a summary report that we had our engineering company do that actually addressed that question and the turning of semi-trucks with lumber and all that to show that their radiuses and all that would be involved with that would be working just fine and in accordance with what their study had found. So that was a follow-up study that we gave the Planning Commission to show that that access was in fact a good access point and the width of the turn lane and everything should work well together. If there's any questions, I hope we can answer them.
Maybe you wanna know, the 22% that's left in green space?
Yep.
Do we know basically?
Yes, I can answer that. The 22% is, we have 46.4 acres, so we have a little over 10 acres of green space, which is that area that is in between the settlement and Heron Manor. The settlement itself is actually 75 acres, and it only has about 9 acres of green space, which is delineated in your plan that you have before you. At the very top where it says existing open space, that's the existing open space that belongs to the settlement.
So it's about 10 acres.
Yes, Andy?
Connie, I noticed that you have a connected path
Yes.
going through that existing open space. Is that something that Heron Bay is gonna install, or how does that work? Is that something that was already on the plan for settlement?
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, actually, the same developer, the same houses, everything that's going in the settlement now will be built and constructed in the Heron Manor. And the associations, we already have the agreements which we had provided for the Planning Commission, showing the association will be overseeing those paths and also the stormwater areas.
So is that path, that connection will be made, and what I'm talking about is this, it says existing open space and it's a connection up to the softball fields?
Mm-hmm.
Is that gonna be installed, who will install that? At what time would that be installed? I guess I should ask that question.
The development of that phase.
He's
With-
talking about
with
the
that
existing
phase?
open space
What's that?
in the final phase.
Yeah.
Probably more in the final phases, because what we'll start doing is we'll develop from Broad Street up, which was another question, which is probably a good thing for you to consider. Some of the concerns of people at the settlement was that construction trucks and everything would be coming through John Reese Parkway, but our development will start on the southern area where the access is, the secondary access, and we'll work north, so we won't have any connectivity to those two stub ropes until we're almost completed with the development.
Tim?
As is often the case,
Mhm.
this was, I think you, in a previous conversation, or this was essentially approved in 2003.
The actual zoning goes way back, and we've looked that up. In 2013, it was still RM, and I can hand that out also,
That's-
if you want to.
It's just I didn't know that this was already coming here. As I look at Isaac Tharp, once again, it stubs.
Mhm.
Is there more plans for the other farm field that I'm looking for? I guess I've,
Show me what you're talking about.
Here?
No,
okay.
that's not part of it.
I just wasn't sure if this is Heron Manor and Cranes Bay is coming next, and then.
Perhaps,
Loon-
if this is a success.
Perhaps, I get that part, but I just wanna make sure that I'm not seeing just a part of this. Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
So understanding that approval of the entire development is contingent upon the rezoning of this, this 4.5 acres. If the rezoning was denied, would the developer come back and just try to develop the northern part of the
Well,
property, just out of
yeah,
curiosity?
as Scott said, we're basically committed, when we went through the planning commission, we committed to not only purchase that additional property, but to provide the secondary access, what would become a main access. And, they would like to do that. We are hopeful that the zoning on this 4.85 acres won't be denied. An intersection and an extension of a road like this will cost anywhere between $1 million and $1,150,000. The development will be a very lovely one, and they would rather have that presence and less retail and that general business in between their entrance and the rest of the development.
Mr. Barstow?
Klima, the area that I'm talking about now is west of John Reese Parkway and over to the backyards of the houses that are on,
John Reese.
no,
Heron Avenue?
Heron Avenue. So what's gonna happen in there?
You're talking about here?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's already zone GB. My clients do not have that in contract. That's been zoned general business for quite a while. That's there for commercial uses as a frontage, yes.
We don't develop it.
Any other questions from council? Okay, any closing remarks from you?
I hope you will give it your greatest efforts to get this supported. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Last chance? All right, I will, let's see, if there's anything else, okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Barstow and seconded by Mr. Powell. Discussion? And roll, please.
Carter? Yes. Walter?
Yes?
Powell?
Yes.
Barstow?
Yes.
Hayes? Yes. Pickens?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Next meeting in 17 minutes.
Yes.